this book was almost not this book. This book was almost another book.
Yeah, it morphed.
Meaning a very different book. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to talk about that because when we got off the trail, we received a ton of accolades. People were like, you guys are awesome. This is incredible. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And what they were talking about was hiking, walking, like the physical external stuff that's easy to see.
That you actually did 2,000 plus miles. Whoa, that's crazy. 5 months.
Which, fuck, let's give ourselves some credit. They did kind of kick ass in a way. It was hard.
Yeah. For sure.
So then when I set out to write the book, I started writing a book about, it's basically like a physical adventure book.
Yeah.
And in a physical adventure book, your enemies are like bears and rattlesnakes and snow.
The elements, yeah.
And bad guys like CPS and shit. But here's the problem. Like, none of those things were actually that scary to me at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I mean, the hardest actually was the online critics. But then again, I get a certain energy from that also. So it was hard and weird.
The hardest for me was being in a warm, cozy house and seeing the rain pelt down and know that you have to go back out in it.
Yeah.
So that was hard, but
yeah, that was a pain in the ass.
A lot of times that happened.
But this is how I knew it wasn't that hard, and this is how you know you have a shitty story. Never once did we really seriously think about quitting.
Yeah.
Like seriously, where we're like, we can't do this anymore. We got to throw the towel in.
No, and I don't know if it was just there was so much momentum built up. We had so much help. I mean, maybe we have a lot of grit. I don't know what the factors were.
I just don't think that was our hardest challenge. But it's not to say there weren't challenges.
No.
And this is where what I'm getting to is there was something far more difficult. And if you've heard the story, forgive us because we've told it in a number of places. But for those of you that have read the book, you know there's a few gritty moments, like a few gritty parenting moments that specifically revolve around me and me losing self-control. And when I'm writing the book, because I'm writing a book about bears and rattlesnakes and snow and shit, right? So I think, oh, those gritty parenting moments, those aren't really that important. No one wants to really hear about that in a snow adventure book. Like I don't like the, I'm old school where like my favorite Spider-Man movies are the one where he just kicks ass. Not the one where he's like, you know how they always get to the second, third, fourth one, and then he's like questioning himself, and Batman is like, am I a good person, or should I quit, or hang up my cape? I'm like, fuck that. I just want to see him like use their devices and go after it.
Why? Like,
because it's fun.
Yeah, because it's just purely for entertainment.
Yeah. I mean,
not purely, but most of it.
Who wants to see Batman question himself?
Yeah.
So I started off writing a superhero book about ourselves and how we were superheroes in this way of accomplishing this kind of like heroic task. But I knew we had kind of fucked up and made a mistake when there was one run in particular, and I remembered this story that had stuck with me, which was, and I'm just going to kind of ruin it, but tough if you haven't read it. I don't think it'll really ruin it. But I'm hiking along, and I push. 7 was going so slow. I need to turn off the heat because it's making noise. 7 was going so slow, so I push him, and he's carrying Rainier, and he lands face down in the water, and it was preventable. And that's when I realized I was pushing too far, too fast. And because I was facing actually a conflict inside of me that was far harder and more difficult than bears and rattlesnakes. it actually had to do with controlling my kids and my own goals and letting go and accepting my kids just for who they are and stuff like that.
And also repeating patterns of how you were parented, but wanting to undo that or change that. I mean, it's deep, deep stuff.
Yeah, but not the book I wanted to write. I wanted to write this heroic book where I was the hero.
But there was something in you that said, I need to write about this stuff.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know, but this is what I knew. I went on a run with you.
Yeah.
And I said, Cammie, I remembered this story of pushing 7 and him falling down. And we were on, let's just say, draft number 10 of the manuscript. Okay, so we're running, and we're on draft 9 of this book, and it doesn't mention the scene. And I'm running, and I tell you, oh, Cammie, I remember this story. And you said that was the lowest point of the trail for me.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I was like, oh, shit. Here we have the lowest point of our life, and I'm writing on the trail. This 161 days, the lowest point, and I'm writing a book about this same 161 days, and I don't even include it. I was like, that's a problem.
And I think that what's really interesting, too, is that lowest point for me was days before we were finished.
Which makes sense, actually, because in every story, the climax is always like right before the end. That's when things are the most intense.
Yeah.
But seriously, we weren't really considering quitting in the end, although it was physically hard in the whites and the technical 200 and the rain and all that.
No, but it was a moment where I felt like, was this worth it for you to snap and then push our 13-year-old in a pedal?
Yeah.
I was like, oh no, like maybe this isn't worth it for that.
So then I call up my writer, Megan, and I'm like, Megan, there's this one story that I forgot to mention. Whoops.
Yeah.
And I'm like kind of hoping she'll be like, oh, this is a good book. Like, don't worry about it. That doesn't need to go in. But of course, the reason why I brought it up to her, because I knew it was important. I needed someone else to tell me. And she goes, we have to include that.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I think I just said on the phone, fuck. I knew you were going to say that. Mm-hmm. But then what happened is the entire book changed. And it became the book that I needed to write, which was not about an adventure exactly, or a hike, or man versus bear, although those things are present. But it more became about how I wrestled with parenting models of control and dominance and gave up this old part of myself.
And those things are harder to write about because those things are internal and you can't see them. You can't see the bear. You can't see the sleet, snow. I mean, that's not part of talking about the internal struggle. So I just think that's more challenging.
It was.
And it's more challenging to engage people that way, probably. It's just flashier to like have the bear come out of the woods and maul one of your children.
So this is actually the point of this podcast, is what happens when you make the choice to release the more vulnerable thing and the thing that's more true, because I knew less people were going to be interested in that. More people just want to read the man versus bear hiking 2,000 miles story. And even there's some reviews that say,
this is a bit of a downer.
Yeah, why all the parenting talk? Like, basically thought I was getting into a hiking book. But there's something else that's happened also, which is we have got a lot more other reviews of people saying yes.
You're listening to the Fight for Together podcast.